Hi, my name is Tiago Essinger, and I'm a Millennium Fellow and Campus Director at the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, USA.
Hi, and I'm Andrew Rosenblatt. I'm also a Millennium Fellow at Cornell University in New York in the United States.
It is our great pleasure to welcome you to today's Millennium Fellowship webinar featuring Mr. Matthew Swift from Concordia. Thank you for joining us today. We are first going to start by showing a video of 4 Millennium Fellows who were invited to the 2019 Concordia Annual Summit this past September. It is the largest and most inclusive nonpartisan forum alongside the United Nations General Assembly. Here's a recap of their experience.
Hi, it's Sam Vagar. The Millennium Fellowship is presented by the United Nations Academic Impact and MCN. We are so thrilled at MCN to be here at Concordia to share our work with the world.
My project is called Ecology. We're looking to establish a circular economy around college move-out process. So we're looking to connect move-out supply and move-in demand by giving students a platform to sell their goods during the move-out process, store them over the summer, and then sell them back as affordable dorm supplies during move-in.
My project is called Global Girlhood. Global Girlhood is revolutionizing the way common women interact with each other across the globe. We're doing it by gathering stories of empowerment from common women all over the globe. And we take those stories and we share them with women from other communities, and we ask them to react to the initial story. And by doing that, we're fostering a lot of intercultural dialogue and we're building lasting connections. Another Millennium Fellow did a project with my senior class in high school. Just seeing the change that he made taught me a lot. Young people can make change with bigger organizations too. They don't have to do it in solidarity, and they don't have to do it with just young people around them.
I applied to become a Millennium Fellow because I love my work and I want to share it with the world. And I want to be able to get that support and the ability to do it more effectively from anywhere that I can. And the Millennium Fellowship is just such a great opportunity to do that.
Concordia has been fantastic. Really being put on the same level as, presidents of countries, prime ministers, amazing actors and actresses, people who are really making a real impact in the world. It's not only validating to feel like, the work I'm doing is important too, but it also is just giving me an opportunity, again, to meet these people and be in the same room with folks who can actually make real lasting change on the issues that I care about. It's been a fantastic opportunity.
I'm so proud of our Millennium Fellows. There's over 1,000 Millennium Fellows worldwide this year in 16 countries. They are changing the world, will positively impact 1 million people's lives this year. We are building a grassroots movement for the Sustainable Development Goals, and we hope more student leaders worldwide join us at millenniumfellows.org.
All right, awesome. So just a quick breakdown of today's webinar. The total time will be around 50 minutes. We will first have our moderated dialogue for around 15 minutes with Mr. Swift. And for the remaining 30 minutes, we will open it up for Q&A so you can ask your very own questions to Mr. Swift.
And during the webinar, you'll be muted. And if you're chosen to ask a question, you'll be automatically unmuted. And throughout the webinar, please type your introductions, like your name, your university, where you're from, and your question in the chat box. And then we'll choose questions that we'd like Mr. Swift to answer. You'll be unmuted and you can ask your question. So it's wonderful to see so many faces here from all around the world. So why don't we begin? So to start off today's talk, we'd like to introduce Mr. Swift.
Mr. Matthew Swift is the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Concordia. Since its inception in 2011, Mr. Swift and his business partner, Nicholas Logotheris, have grown Concordia into a reputable and impactful nonpartisan organization dedicated to actively creating, elevating, and sustaining cross-sector partnerships for positive impact. Mr. Swift's passion for entrepreneurship, global affairs, and collaboration has led to Concordia's being recognized as the preeminent global hub for cross-sector partnerships. Under Mr. Swift's leadership, Concordia has hosted numerous global summits and practitioner-level concernings. Concordia has now held 8 annual summits in New York City, with the most recent being this past September, the largest and most inclusive nonpartisan forum on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Concordia has also held regional summits in Miami, USA, Bogota, Colombia, and Athens, Greece.
Mr. Swift has brought together an impressive group of international leaders to serve on Concordia's Leadership Council, which is comprised of heads of state from around the world and top CEOs from multinational corporations. Prior to establishing Concordia, Mr. Swift spent 6 years in the media industry, holding positions within News Corporation and subsidiaries, Fox News Channel, British Sky Broadcasting, and the New York Post. He has also spent considerable time on Capitol Hill, working for Senator John Warner of Virginia and the Business Roundtable. Mr. Swift is also currently an advisory council member of the Millennium Leadership Program at the Atlantic Council and sits on the McCain Institute for International Leadership Next Generations Leaders Advisory Council, as well as the U.S. Department of State's Advisory Committee on Public-Private Partnerships. Additionally, he's an Air Mobility Command civic leader within the United States Air Force and sits on the board of the Selene Institute. So, welcome, Mr. Swift. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I apologize, a few issues with our video system, so I'm on you via my laptop now.
Yeah, not a problem.
Thank you.
Why don't we just get started with you talking a little bit about yourself and a bit about what you do at Concordia and what Concordia does.
Of course, of course. So thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I very, very much appreciate it. And I'm really, really excited to be on this call today and this virtual interview. I do want to say my congratulations to Sam and the entire Millennium Fellowship team. I think this organization is incredibly important, and we're so excited to have you as part of the broader Concordia community. So it's been a real pleasure to learn more about what you do over the last year or so. First, I'll sort of start with just a little bit of my background. I was born and raised in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I do not come from a background or an upbringing that would in any way lend itself to what I am doing today. And I think that that's a very, very important message for you all to take into consideration. I grew up in a very nice, I had a great childhood. I grew up in a nice small town in the state of Virginia. I had a very nice upbringing, but it was not a global or worldly upbringing by any stretch of the imagination. Charlottesville is a small town. It's a wonderful town, but it's a small town. It wasn't that common that you would travel overseas or that you would do anything that was completely foreign, that a head of state would come to Charlottesville. And so growing up in that town, though, I always knew that I was very interested in global affairs, that I was very interested in politics, that I was very interested in entrepreneurship and creating my own organization. I knew that. And through a series of opportunities and eventually landing at Georgetown University, I was able to gain a set of experiences and an exposure in a way that I never anticipated. And so upon completion of university, I co-founded Concordia with my best friend, a man named Nick Logothetis. And we had known each other since high school. We'd been best friends since high school, but we started Concordia together. And so when we launched it on a core principle of using the UN General Assembly as an important convening point to bring leaders of the public and private sector together to talk about some of the most pressing issues, and more specifically, talk about how the public and private sectors can work together to advance social impact and address these important issues. And rather than create a think tank or an institute at a university, start with a focus on convening. Now, we weren't the first ones to say, hey, we should hold an event or a summit at the same time that heads of state from all around the world descended upon New York City. To his great credit, that was President Bill Clinton. In the creation of the Clinton Global Initiative, he really recognized immediately that there was a very important convening opportunity to take place at the same time as the United Nations. And so we followed to a great extent in his footsteps. Our first summit had 100 people. And my co-founder likes to joke, but it's the honest truth. It was mostly our friends because we didn't know anybody, right? And we started with this 100-person convening forum, and through a series of successes, a series of failures, a lot of luck, a lot of hard work, learning from mistakes, and an amazing team, we've been able to build this organization into the largest convening forum that takes place at the same time as the United Nations General Assembly, and an opportunity for leaders from across sectors and around the world to raise awareness on different subjects, to talk about public and private sector cooperation, to talk about the good and bad of public-private partnerships, to talk about how you align public policy with the interests of business, because a core belief of Concordia is that the private sector is a critical vehicle for change and advancing an issue or a subject. So, it's been a fascinating journey. It's been one of a lot of highs, a lot of lows, a lot of lessons learned, a number of instances of quickly being humbled. But as we get ready for 2020, which is the 10th year of Concordia, we have found ourselves at the center of a lot of very, very important global conversations. We have 3 regional initiatives: Concordia Americas, which is headquartered in Bogota, Colombia; Concordia Europe, which is headquartered in Madrid, Spain; and Concordia Africa, which is headquartered in Kigali, Rwanda, with the intentions of creating further initiatives down the road. And so all of that lends itself to where we are today. But I have great respect for the Millennium Fellowship, and I'm excited to be with you all today because I want to also learn from you all issues that we should be talking about, but also how I can help use the Concordia platform to raise awareness and leverage issues. So very, very much looking forward to this morning's conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing. So we do have a few questions that we would like to ask on behalf of the Millennium Fellows. And first off, how does Concordia develop and foster these cross-sector partnerships between the public and private sector that you were mentioning has a grave importance in driving social impact?
Well, I think first off, we have a platform that is very, very attractive to leaders of the public and private sectors to talk about issues. And so we use that as kind of a way to draw people in. From there, we use the bully pulpit and this is an important theme you'll hear me talk about a lot as it relates to Concordia, our substantial focus on being objective, to really developing programming through the lens of objectivity in a way that, frankly, I feel a lot of our news and media and a lot of our political leaders are not doing. And so we use these partnerships as an output from our convening. In year 6 of Concordia's development, we went through a bit of a identity crisis. Known have a great summit. We wanted to be known for more, right? So we went through this whole process and we determined all these different ways of which we could work on a wide array of topics at a deeper level. And we built out this entire research arm of Concordia. And I very quickly learned the lesson of the fact that we did not have the resources nor the ability to produce research that was actually meaningful, but more importantly, objective. And so it was in going through that process that we quickly realized there is immense value to our summits, and it's okay to be an organization that is only known for our summits, because summits are the catalyst by which people come together, institutions can work together, and that creating an environment that is friendly and welcome to those populations of people, to those that are looking to do good, but also to start a company, run a major company, get into government, run a government, work in different levels of government. all of those, how do we align the interests of those people in advancing different subjects? So partnership is at the core of what we do. And so when we learned that the research space was not the space for us to be in, we changed that into the partnership development space. So we have an entire team dedicated to partnership development whose sole focus is to understand who's operating within the Concordia community and how can we build partnerships within that community.
Thank you. That's awesome. And we were also wondering, so you guys have a history of working in education programs and working with youth and young people. So we're wondering, what role do you think young people have in furthering the UN 2030 agenda?
Well, I think the young people have an enormous role in advancing the 2030 agenda, especially because the 2030 agenda is going to impact them more than anybody else. I think that we do strive at Concordia to elevate young people. The opening panel of the 9th Concordia Annual Summit last month was with 6 graduate students, each from a different country, talking about how they feel about what's going on in the world. We had a student from Turkey, we had a student from Morocco, we had a student from Slovenia, we had a student from India, we had a student from Colombia. And so it was in talking to these students that was setting the stage for how do young people feel about the state of the world. I think some of the answers were surprising, some of the answers were not surprising. But the reason we did that was because we wanted to show that how could you have a conversation or a summit talking about some of the most important issues facing the world today without elevating and talking to younger people. When we have been developing over time our Africa initiative, how can you talk about the biggest issues facing the continent without talking to young people? That's crazy to me. Yet when you see some of the largest summits going on in the world today, you could point to panel after panel after panel where the median age of everybody on the panel is probably 65. And so we're really looking to change that. It's easier said than done, but we're looking to change that. And we're looking to make it a major tenet of all things Concordia programming. So that's one of the reasons I'm especially excited to be talking to you all this morning.
All right, thank you. I will say it is very much appreciated to bring the youthful voice to these conversations. That's something that is not often heard, or something that youth may not feel like their voice is heard. So as we're wrapping up these moderated questions, I will say to Millennium Fellows, if you do have a question for Mr. Swift, please do not forget to put it in the chat box, and we will call on you afterwards. So last question here. Millennium Fellows are at the beginning of their social impact careers. What concrete advice do you have for us in developing partnerships, whether it is in government, public, or private sector?
First and foremost, I think there has to be a willingness to take risk and, frankly, to not always follow what might be expected depending on the field that you work in. So if you're going into government, I think that it's very, very important to think about how you can learn to work within government, within the bureaucracy of government, but at the same time, constantly be thinking about how could you do something differently? And at the core, it's asking the question, why is it done this way? And if you think about it, in the space of government, that's so rarely done. But I think everything is changing so rapidly. We talk a great deal at Concordia about the role of technology in society. And I would assume that most people on this call would agree that governments around the world are not necessarily doing a good job of adapting to technological developments and evolution. How do governments do that, and how do they approach that? I think government will best be served by people who have a healthy respect for process, bureaucracy, and why things are done a certain way, while also a constant entrepreneurial mind driven by a sense of urgency and a willingness to take risks, to say, why is it this way when it could be this way? And I think that's incredibly important. Easier said than done, but incredibly important. If you're looking to get into the private sector, I think the same sort of approach needs to happen. You're looking at a guy who's 33 years old from a small town in Virginia, yes, with great opportunity. I'm not trying to say I wasn't set up to have a lot of these opportunities, because I was lucky and fortunate enough to be able to go to institutions like Georgetown. I was fortunate enough to be able to have a series of internships. All of those things played into this. But at its core, you're looking at a 33-year-old who is competing against people like Michael Bloomberg or Michael Milken or Klaus Schwab at Davos, or to some extent, Bill Clinton when he had the Clinton Global Initiative. And we have been able to convene these broader communities of people around these issues because we were willing to ask, we were willing to take risk, we've operated with a consistent sense of urgency, and this will sound strange, but we've been naive. We were naive enough to try this. And so what I would urge everybody on this call to do is to really think about how can I come into a situation, taking risk, understanding how to advance change, sticking to a core set of principles, but being to some extent a bit of a disruptor. And I think that's very, very important as you think from your career perspective.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. So those are all the questions we have for you, although I could certainly come up with more, especially based off of what you've said so far. But we're going to open up for the general Q&A for everyone, for all the Millennium Fellows attending. So remember, you guys are going to stay muted until we call your name, and then you'll be unmuted and you'll have a chance to ask your question. So first up, why don't we go with Emily Perez Garcia?
Hello, Matt. So my question was, we heard that you've been doing a lot of stuff, and as a college student, I'm also doing a lot of stuff related to school, but I really wanted to know, how do you time manage everything you're doing?
That's a great question, and a really, really important question, and it's something that I struggle with every day. It is far easier it's easier said than done. I think there's a couple of things. I've become data obsessed. My team will tell you I've become obsessed with CRM, record keeping, how we track relationships, how we track people. And the reason why is because strong data and strong context of things is really important to being efficient with your time. If you have to spend 20 minutes going in and looking to see, well, who would be the right person for this, then you've just wasted 20 minutes that could have been saved by simply keeping good records and tracking things very closely. So that's one. Two, I think it's embracing forms of technology. As an internal team at Concordia, we use Slack. I know that a lot of organizations use Slack now. That's been a great way to communicate, and it's frankly cut down on emails. It's saved a lot of time. Third is a willingness to think about how to change your working styles to become more efficient. I'm a bit of a traditional guy in that I very, very much like paper. So every day I wake up in the morning, and when I get to work, my team leaves me a folder that has the day and the date. In that folder is a sheet of paper for every appointment that I have that day. And on that sheet of paper, for instance, we had our weekly programming meeting today. I take my notes there, right? So I take my notes on the calendar entry. At the end of the day, I go through that folder, and if I'm done with everything in that meeting and all the takeaways from that, it's actually very exciting. I mark with a big Sharpie a giant D, and I put it in the folder. If I have not finished it, it goes into my bag to either work on that night or work on it another time, and I can't get rid of the sheet of paper until it's done. All of these files then go into a massive system that now goes back 2 years of every workday I've ever had. And I can go back at any point and say, wait a minute, I met Jim so-and-so on this date from X company. I wonder what happened in that meeting. I'm able to go back to the file and see my direct notes from there. And most of the time, I'm also able to see a meeting summary that's sent out from the team. Again, data driving it, note-taking, because one of the things that I struggled with from an attempt to be efficient is that it is amazing how much time you can waste in meetings where you're not prepared or you don't have context or you're not paying attention. And so trying to cut down on the number of conversations that I'm having where I've run into that is a bit of a problem. So I think what I would say is think about your systems and also think about what works for you. Please, please, please think about that, Emily. What works for you? Don't try to take what works for me and apply it to you. But I think systems and data and taking good notes, prioritization, those are all the keys to being able to stay on task, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I agree. I like the folder system. Like right now, I'm taking notes of what you said to me.
I want to remember. I learned it in college from a professor of mine, and he taught this great class, and it was essentially the class's theme was how do you run large institutions, and he was a former U.S. Secretary of Defense, so he'd run an institution of over 4 million people, including, this is amazing, over 10,000 lawyers. And so I figured he was a good model for how you run something efficiently. Now, we don't have 10,000 lawyers, but this system's worked pretty well for me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question is from Gideon from Ghana. Please do remember when you are unmuted to introduce yourself with your name, university, and country. So Gideon is not on the chat right now, so we will read his question. So the question was about learning experience, specifically for Matt. We have learned to be able to serve. So what constitutes your learning experience?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I don't quite understand what the question is.
So the subject is on learning experience. So the general idea for, I guess, it's how you have evolved in changing habits. What have you learned along the way? How has your experience changed?
I think I tend to be somebody that pays close attention to how others function and operate. So I will take oftentimes a lot of notes in that, but one of the important lessons, and that's why I said what I said to Emily at the end, it's really important that you not try to be somebody you're not, and so that you don't, I know people that are some of the most efficient people I know that don't actually start their workday until noon. Now they go until 11 p.m., but they don't start their workday till noon because they know for a fact that in the morning I am not a productive worker. It's about knowing yourself. And so in that process, it's also about learning, but at the same time, learning through your own lens, not through their lens. So the way that we develop a lot of the work at Concordia actually is very organic, in that I'll be at a conference. I remember in 2013, I went to a conference, and one of the big themes of that conference was human trafficking. And I didn't know anything about human trafficking, and I didn't know the statistics behind sort of how rampant human trafficking was. I then made it a major pillar of what Concordia covers and talks about. So I learned by listening, I learned by paying attention, I learned by themes. I'll think of certain themes and then stick to those themes. It gets harder and harder as you're burdened with more managerial duties. Management is very time intensive and consuming. I don't read nearly as much as I would like. Although I have started listening to podcasts and audiobooks much more, which has made a big difference in my life because it's made my commute and other things much more efficient.
Yeah, thank you. I also got into podcasts. Driving for long times in California can really get to you. But so our next question is from Amanda Lokpa. So remember to just introduce who you are, where you're from, and what university you go to. You should be unmuted. And if not, if you're having trouble with your technology, we can just read your question for you. All right. It seems like she's having trouble with her microphone. Amanda is from the University of Ghana, in Ghana, of course. And she asks, I'd like to know how you have kept your interests alive after graduating.
My interest in what specifically?
Amanda doesn't specify, but I assume everything that you run in with Concordia, some things that you've already talked about, like human trafficking, for example, and how you become interested in new things, and what you were interested in college, and how you managed to grow on that and maintain that.
I think a big part of it was that I've always been very, very interested in news. I've always been very interested in, you know, news of the day and what's going on. I mean, if you look at my office, right? Here's my office, and then you see I've got news all day, constantly. So I'm always really, really interested in that, so that lends itself to being naturally a very curious person. I do hit my limits though, and one of the ways that I work through it is to take a break and to take a refresher every now and then. So for instance, I will take one day a month and literally not do anything. I mean, not do anything. I'm the least productive slug you've ever seen in your life, one day a month, because it's like you have to have that major reset of your brain. And so I think a big part of it is making sure to not overwhelm the system to then get burnout. And I think if you're in an entrepreneurial space, burnout is a really common affliction that is the reason why 9 out of 10 organizations fail within their first year, at least in the United States. 9 out of 10 organizations fail within their first year of operation. So that's really important. So no, I think so much of it goes to balance. And this was not something I fully appreciated years ago, but now I really do.
All right, thank you. We are going to go to the next question from Bettina Okuni and from the University of Nairobi, Kenya. Please introduce yourself and your question.
Okay. Hello, my name is Bettina Okini. I'm from the University of Nairobi. My question, when Matt was speaking about time management, I realized that I could relate a lot to that topic. And I wanted to ask, does it get to a point where you have to let some projects go because you have like a lot going on? And then because I adopted the 80-20 rule, and sometimes you feel bad for letting other things go. So what are some of the methods you use to maybe say this is not too important? And does it ever get to a point where you have to actually let projects go? Yes.
I'll tell you the best way to do that, because I'm one of those that I hate to say no to people, and I hate to, I'm always very sensitive to saying, is this conversation I'm having, or is this opportunity that I'm looking at right now something that is really strong, and am I missing a major opportunity by not paying close enough attention to it? Now there's two important principles to this. One is you have got to follow your gut. I can't emphasize this enough. When I've gotten to a better place of really following my gut, 9 times out of 10, your gut does not lie. If you sit there and say, I think this is a waste of time, or, I don't know that I'm working with an honest broker here. Those are all perfect examples where you then would go to say, I'm not going to pursue this. And it's scary. It's really scary to do that. But it's okay to say, my gut says this doesn't make sense. And I always find it so refreshing when you see someone and you present them with an opportunity, you invite them to a great restaurant, or you present this idea that you think is so obvious to them as to, how could you turn this down? And they do. right? And I always find people like that fascinating because they must have this amazing freedom to be able to really know to such a close extent what they want. They're either afraid of everything and they say no to everything, or they have this incredible confidence that is this driver of somebody who says, no, that's not in my wheelhouse. The most successful people consistently that you see professionally are people who are extraordinarily good at picking and choosing the things that are right for them. And that is really not an easy thing to do. And so I have so much respect for people that do that. I would say that's an important distinction to sort of getting better at saying no. I think the other thing is designing barriers of entry that help weed out the nonsense, if you will. So when we became an organization that had to build out a membership, a partnership, and a sponsorship model, we didn't want to exclude people who should be there. So we didn't want to price things so high that all of a sudden this whole part of our network would then no longer come and do anything with us. And we didn't want to, but at the same time, we needed to become an organization that was financially sustainable. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And so we priced it at a point that all of a sudden it was amazing. The people who had gotten things for free, all of a sudden, some of them said, oh, that makes sense. We'll support you. We'll pay you. We'll give you funding to be able to do what you're doing. And then these other people, who I then quickly realized were taking advantage of me this whole time. And said, well, wait a minute, why would we pay for this? And it was an amazing metric, because it was an amazing thing to say, well, if you don't want to pay for it, then obviously you don't see much worth in it. So then frankly, we shouldn't be doing anything together. I'll never forget, Concordia, we have what's called our programming partnership model, where we partner with institutions from all around the world, now over 50 institutions, on different subjects and issues. And we built it as a paying model. And so I went to this very respected global think tank that you probably all know exactly what it is, but I'm not going to tell you because that would be mean. And I went to them and I said, we're shifting to this paid model. You've gotten a lot out of Concordia. You've hosted these amazing panels. We've co-branded all this stuff. Now we're switching to a paid model. And they go, well, we wouldn't pay. Why would we pay? And I said, well, I wouldn't even look at it at this point as paying. I look at it as cost sharing, frankly, for what you're getting out of it. And they said, no, we would never do that. And then when it came time for the summit, they reached out to me and they said, well, but where's our session? And our brand isn't listed. And why aren't all these things happening? And I said, well, you didn't want to pay. And it was amazing, the sense of entitlement that this institution had, that they thought that they had an exclusive on all good content and they had an exclusive on the issues and subject areas you cover. And so it said a lot to me, and it gave me a very, very important lesson. So I can tell you that while I really like the people that run it and I count them as friends, if I'm coming to that city where they're based for meetings, I can tell you I frankly don't waste my time because they don't get it.
Yeah, thank you for
Okay,
that.
thank you very much. Thank you very much for, yes, thank you so much. You've answered a lot of questions and I've taken a lot of maybe notes, and I've learned that it's not wrong to say no to people. I also have that problem. I don't want to say no to people
so
in projects.
Hard.
Yes.
It's so hard.
So thank you. Thank you much.
Of course.
That's good to hear that it's hard for even people like you, Matt. Next we'll hear
it's awful.
So next we'll hear from Hua Li. You should be unmuted and just introduce yourself, your university, and your question, please.
Oh, hey, Matt. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Lillian. I'm from Northeastern Boston. My project focuses on SDG 4, quality education and education access for all. The focus of the project is about financial education, improving financial literacies for the youth, which we think is a critical issue. I want to ask your insight about when you're making transition from one kind of partnership to the others, what kind of challenge are you faced and how do you solve the problems? and how do you expand your influence globally? For example, you mentioned about the organization in Spain as a European. How do you explain for that? How do you working with the compliance issues? How do you find panelists and speakers from other parts of the world? Thank you.
Thank you. It's difficult because we have limited resources and we have limited team. We're a very small team compared to most of the organizations we're compared to. I think one major part of it is being open-minded. I remember 5 years ago, my then number 2 at Concordia came to me and said, we should be talking a lot about what's happening in Venezuela. And apart from being able to point Venezuela out on a map, I couldn't tell you just about anything about Venezuela. So I said, okay, I trust you. We're doing this summit in Miami. Go design something on Venezuela. So she invited this woman named Lillian Torrey, who is this incredibly famous, not really then, but has grown over the last 5 years, human rights activist. Her husband is very active, obviously, in politics, and depending on what happens in Venezuela, is a renowned political figure there. And I sort of just let it all grow. I didn't ask questions, really. I sort of trusted other people. I said, okay, let's do this. And it ended up being one of the most important things we've ever done, because we elevated Lillian at the first international forum that she ever spoke at, as she began to talk about what was happening in Venezuela, what was especially happening from a human rights perspective. And so it was, it's those kind of instances, it's that organic process. I know when you come to our summits, you might be sitting there and thinking, it's strange, you don't have anyone senior from Japan on your stage, or you don't have anyone senior from Chile on your stage, right? And why are you missing those parts? The cost of doing things in this very organic way that we do them is that sometimes we miss those opportunities. Sometimes we miss those key moments. And so I think the lesson there is to keep an open mind and pursue things, and be willing to not always know to be the expert on everything. I like to I like to be, and this is unique for sure, it's not common, but one gift that I've always had is I like to be in a room where I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I like to be in the room with people that are a hell of a lot smarter than me, because then you're learning, right? I can't remember who said it, but there was that great quote of sort of if I'm the smartest person in the room, then in no way am I ever going to be good at my job. I can't remember the quote. It was much more eloquent than that. But what I think the key there is, how do you to learn about that subject? So that's really how we grow a lot of our, is by being able to tap into those opportunities that sort of come on our doorstep, even if we don't know all the history and the nuance, and we haven't read every book on the subject. We've got a large network of people that we really trust. That's great, and we use that network to drive a lot of the subjects that we cover.
Great, thank you so much.
Of course.
All right, thank you. Our next question, we're going to go back to Luis. You should be unmuted. Please make sure to introduce yourself and your question.
Yes, hello, my name is Luis. I'm from Mexico City, Mexico and Monterrey. And my question was, which were the biggest challenges you had on the creating the organization, and how do you face them?
I think biggest challenge, I'll give you a broad challenge, and then I'll give you a very a more specific sort of day-to-day challenge. Broad challenge, maintaining that constant sense of urgency. That's a lot more difficult than I thought. That balance that I talked about. How do you take time to really kind of disconnect your brain and take a break and take a moment? Those are really important things to think about, because play a long game, not a short game. And if you play a short game, you're invariably going to get burned out. And if you get burned out, you never necessarily know what's going to happen. So that balance piece is really important, because especially if you're the one starting the organization, you are going to face a lot of challenges. It's going to take 5 times longer than you expected to. It's going to cost 10 times more than you would ever expect it to, right? So that's an important rule of thumb. In terms of day-to-day challenge, I think it goes back to prioritization. How do you pick, what are the right things to do? How do you pick and choose those things so that you're never doing something that is a complete waste of time? And that's not easy. Here's my schedule for the day, right? It's kind of frightening. I've pretty much got something every hour today. I hate days like this, because when I then finish the day, I have to sort of almost start a whole new work day to make sure that I've caught up on everything that took place today. So all of that goes into a very, very important strategy to say, protect your time, make sure that you are prioritizing things properly, make sure that you are really, you're protecting yourself in that process, and play a long game. That is one of the more important things. People our age and your age, I think there tends to be this sort of, well, I've worked here for a year, so now I'm going to go try this, and then I'm going to go try that, and I'm going to then go try this. I don't know about you, but my dad worked at the same place for 35 years. So we think very differently about being in the workforce and what we do from a career perspective. That's fine. You can approach a career that way. I will say that when I look at a resume and I see 10 things in the span of 10 years, I'm immediately concerned. It's a major red flag, so just remember that. But I think in principle, play the long game. Remember that you don't have to be somewhere by age 30 to be able to get to this place. I'll wake up sometimes and say, oh my God, what am I doing? And I'm running this organization, but it's so difficult, and I'm 33 and I better hurry up and get married and have kids and do all these other things and be, get into government and then do this and all these things, right? And it's like, wait a minute. Why do you have to do all that by the age of 33? So play the long game is going to be one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this process.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next, we have a question from Banini. If you're on, you'll be unmuted. So just introduce yourself and ask your question. Are you there?
Hello.
Oh, fantastic.
Hello. Yeah. Okay, so good. It's good evening from Ghana here. My name is Famous Kofi Banini from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. Hello, sir. Thanks very much for your submission so far. My question is, please, based on, have you ever come to that situation where you are torn between two situations, very great situations, and you choosing one will affect the other? So I want to know if you have ever come across something like that. How best were you able to go about this kind of situation? And also, how were you able to influence people to support your vision? How were you able to influence them to support Concordia up to the stage it is very now? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think your question to some extent touches on prioritization. There are some situations that I find myself in where I know by purely reaching the capacity issue that I am probably going to screw up a relationship. I'm not going to hit what they are expecting me to do. And there's very little of what I could do to avoid that. And so there do come situations, especially when you're having a summit with over 3,000 people, representatives of 90 countries, 500 of whom are speakers. You're going to run into situations where you have to pick and choose. And there are consequences to that. There are big consequences to that. And I think that there, an important element to that is sometimes you just have to recognize I am making a choice here. I am choosing to not hit a success point the way that I would like to. And I've hit a capacity and there's not a lot that I can do about that. That's definitely something that happens and you have to choose. And the consequences can definitely have impact on other things. There can be that domino effect. One thing I've learned in this process though is that if you're making that choice, reputation is everything. And so it would probably be a lot better if you just simply say, I'm making this choice. I've made this mistake. I've hit this issue of capacity. I'm sorry. How can we fix it? And I've found that a lot of times having those conversations is really, really important to that process.
Thank you so much. And this would be the last question. I just had a question on, so you had a lot of experience working within different government organizations and interacting with different heads of state and so and so. I study policy and biology here at Cornell, and so I'm thinking about ways on how we can use policy to improve public health. And so I'm wondering why you wanted to go with an organization like, begin an organization like Concordia, instead of working more within the public sphere or working with policy to affect change.
I don't think it was really a choice quite like that. You know, it's interesting. You can plan all you want, but there's a real limit to the extent to which you can really, really plan. This opportunity was something that sort of grew organically and came from a number of things. So first it was, okay, let's start an organization. Second, it was, okay, let's start an organization that is a summit. Great, we do a summit. For all intents and purposes, it's a success. But, you know, that was a lot to do. I don't know that I want to do that again. And that's true, by the way, this is a true story. So we went to our board and we said, you know, maybe we'll do this every other year kind of thing. And they said, how much would it take from all of us for you to be able to do one next year? How can you stick to your original plan? And I remember we gave a number that I thought would blow them out of the water. They would never agree to something like that. But they were so happy with what we had done in September of 2011 that they gave us the funding we needed to then do what we needed to do in September 2012. In year 3, my best friend and I, we started a for-profit company to take to work in a totally different space, but to try and do a for-profit company and do a nonprofit. That for-profit company failed, blew up, right? The reference of you learn more from your successes is very true. So at each step of the way, I didn't sit there and say, okay, in 10 years, I'm going to have Concordia here and I'm going to be doing this, and I'm going to be doing Y. There's a lot more to play to the experiences you're having and pay attention to the experiences that you're having. And as a student, it's really important that you keep your eyes open to those opportunities. Quick side story, and then I know we have to wrap up. At Georgetown, it's really interesting. I was able to take a class from former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. That's the great thing about a place like Georgetown being in Washington, D.C., these amazing professors. And at the end of her class, it was once a week, it was a seminar class, it was 3 hours every Monday morning. She would offer office hours and lunch at this restaurant called The Tombs, which was right across the street. So for an hour and a half, if you had time, you could go to that. I was the only student in a 60-person class that went to every single lunch. That doesn't mean I'm smarter than everyone in the room, because I wasn't. Most of the other students spoke multiple languages. I only speak one. Most of the other students in the class had straight A's. I certainly did not. The difference was I recognized an opportunity when I saw it, but I didn't necessarily have a grand plan. I wasn't sitting there saying, well, if I spend these 5 hours with her, then maybe something will change and I will be able to do this. Not at all. And you know what? She was the first person that I pitched Concordia to. She's participating in Concordia. She's an amazing woman. She's an inspiration. But it was that time over coffee and taking advantage of an opportunity that might have not been most academic, but was a great opportunity. And that is, I think, one of the things that separated me from every other person in that class. Now, that is not to say the other students haven't gone on to probably successful careers, but for what I wanted to do, being entrepreneurial, interested in news, interested in global affairs, interested in all these different topics, I saw an inherent value and I never missed a moment. And I watched a lot of other really smart people miss those moments because of probably a different alignment of priorities.
That's incredible. Yeah, thank you. Gives you meaning to seize the moment. It's interesting. I have a professor here who took that same class with Madeleine Albright.
Really?
Yeah. And so I was at her office hours, and she just has a picture with her casually like hugging Madeleine Albright. Like,
I love it. There we go.
But we are out of time, and that's a wrap for all the questions. Thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time for sharing with us out of your really busy schedule. And so I know the fellows would love to keep in touch with you. What would
Absolutely.
be the best way to keep in touch?
The best way to keep in touch with me is through my email.
All right. Thank you once again for an amazing talk. I know I really enjoyed it. Just looking at the group chat and the questions that were asked, people taking notes, people talking about it. It was truly exceptional. We got to learn a lot in such a short amount of time. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I'd like to also thank all the Millennium Fellows who joined the webinar today. I hope you were able to gain some great insights, and we look forward to seeing you all again for our next webinar with Dr. Elvis Ezzi on Friday at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register on Crew or on the Millennium Fellowship website, millenniumfellows.org. And that is all we have for this webinar. Thank you once again, and have a great week.
Thank you.